Please welcome Auslaug Magnus Doder, CEO and founder, Katya and Moda Operandi, Brad Ballantyne, CEO, Fox River Mills, Goncalo Cruz, CEO and co-founder, Platform E, John Thorbeck, Chairman, Change Capital, with Edward Hertzman, President and founder, Sourcing Journal.
Hello again. This is not CGI. I'm in fact sitting next to my good friend, John Thorbeck. John, it's good to see you in the flesh after 2 years. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining me today. So as I said in my opening remarks, there's certainly no lack of bad news. That's for sure. And I know you give me a hard time for amplifying that too often. But I also said in my opening remarks that I don't want the industry to use all the supply chain headwinds as an excuse not to innovate and not to make changes. I mean, the theme of today is inflection point. So my question, John, to kick it off to you, is putting all those problems aside, where does the innovation need to happen? Where does the investment need to happen? What is the good news and the positivity you can share with this industry?
Okay. Well, Eddie, let's go back to your opening remarks. You used a medical example, a medical metaphor. 90% of patients, even in a life-threatening situation, don't change. 9 out of 10 don't change, even when they're forced to change. So it's easy to be cynical about change, especially in this industry, because we see so little of it. Well, let's focus on the 10%. And I think the guests we've got today are the 10% in this industry, and I think the future belongs to the optimists. And here's 3 approaches. They're all different, but what's consistent among Brad and Gonzalo and Auslaug is that they've embraced the upstream supply chain as part of their story and value proposition. I think this is very significant. I think it's the most ignored, underestimated part of our business and supply chain. And I think there's a lot of upside. So what's the on-ramp to that opportunity? I think that's what the subject is today. And I think it's about the 10%, not the 90%.
Well, let's hear from the 10% then. Those that are not back in the operating room. Brad, let's kick it off with you. You're the rare executive. You began on the factory floor and you now lead a major brand. Can you tell us about your turnaround of Fox River Mills, U.S. production, if people don't know, and the potential you see at both Fox Rivers as well as domestic production?
All right. Well, thanks for having me. So Fox River Mills is actually a vertical knitting operation that's been operating in the U.S. since 1900. So this is our 121st year of operation. We've always really appreciated our heritage. So in 2018, we decided to actually take on a journey to honor our heritage, but actually add cutting edge technology to our mix. And we really started upstream. We wanted to start with the raw materials. We buy yarn and then make finished goods and even sell direct to consumer ourselves. So we built, by early 2019, we had actually converted our entire design development process to digital methods. So virtual prototyping, digital twin, et cetera. All new developments are designed for optimum product performance and manufacturability through that design system. The design piece is just a tool. Really, the process is where you win. And some of the results, if you fast forward today, the results we've had is our hit rates at the factory are above 90% now. Physical samples have been reduced by 70%, and our time to market has been reduced by 62%. And that's without the reductions in inventory and reduction in risk. There's a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish. So the reduction in time to market has really allowed us to partner with retailers to reduce their inventory, working capital, lost sales, markdown, ultimately risk. So the reduction in working capital is accelerating the further pace, to the pace of further innovation, value creation, and obviously sustainable practices. Made in USA has to be more than just a label or a patriotic statement or a quality product. It has to be an advantage to the retailer. And the potential is significant. And in recent years, I've seen estimates as high as 25% of apparel and accessories go unsold, and as much more sold at a markdown. So the greatest beneficiaries of what we're doing upstream are the downstream partners, where we could reduce risk and inventory and allow retailers to sell a greater amount of goods at full price versus having to deal with markdowns or unsold goods.
So is it accurate to say that your value proposition, you're not really going out there trying to wave the patriotic flag? Yeah, it is a benefit, but you're really trying to say that you have a vision to reduce risk, to unlock working capital through less inventory, reduce waste. How are customers responding to this? Because the way I see it is you're saying you can make them more money if this is true. So how does the market respond?
It's not as quite as robust as I would like because it requires collaboration. It requires a little bit of adjustment on either side. So it requires our suppliers to work with us a little bit more. It requires the retailers to give us information, POS information, so we can monitor. It requires that we collaborate on how we choose raw materials or how we reserve capacity. So it's not super easy. It does require a change in process, and many of those processes that our retailers use have been built for longer supply chains. So in many ways, our manufacturing situation, we can react faster than retailers can respond to the information.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're seeing.
So Gonzalo, Platform E is the 3D platform leader for the European luxury brands, a model for personalized production, such as I know you do the Gucci DIY. What do you mean by DKU? I know you use this term quite a bit, a digital product that leads to digital production.
Hello again, and thanks for having me here. So we started working with luxury brands in Europe, and essentially because we believe that fundamentally the fashion value chain model is broken. Personally, as an industrial engineer, I think that the push model, designing, pushing inventory to the market, and then selling, I think it's now obvious that has immense space to be optimized. And we started with luxury because there is one common category of product, which is the personalized and customized goods that by default do not have inventory. So we created this platform essentially to visualize every possible combination of a specific product. And unlike the regular commerce or regular e-commerce operations where you definitely have SKUs, which are finite, here we created something that we call DKU, that stands for Dynamic Keeping Unit or Digital Keeping Unit, which essentially has a common chassis, but then depending on the size or option or material or personalization element, it gets a nuance that is obviously unique. And we don't need to code or preset thousands or even millions of SKUs. It's just one base, let's call it SKU, with many, many different iterations. And with this, we think that we can help on having a better model for the industry, first creating and selling, and only then prompting production and eventually producing only things and products that were effectively bought. And it goes without saying, the working capital model changes from a negative working capital into a positive working capital model, which might be a good leading point to change the industry and to bring more digital elements to again, redesign the full model.
So I know the E and Platform E stands for e-fashion. I'm embarrassed to say this, but John actually corrected me. I thought that was a synonym for e-commerce. Maybe you could tell me a little bit what e-fashion stands for. And can you also talk more about how 3D collaboration in gaming and marketing will influence the apparel and footwear business? I think we're starting to hear a little bit about this, but I don't think people understand the significance of how these industries are going to intersect.
Yeah, so precisely as someone, I guess, 25, 30 years ago coined the term e-commerce, which essentially is doing commerce with electronic means. So things that you used to do on a physical manner, going to a store, doing entirely on a digital or electronic platform. So we want to do the same with fashion, and not just product, the full fashion value chain again. So many people are and many companies are now working with 3D, let's say digital twins, and that's a great part of this new digital transformation. But 3D alone doesn't do anything. It's like taking a photo. You will have a visual element of something. So we need to have rich data. And I like to refer to this as, let's say, an onion where you have several layers. You do have the visual layer that could be a photo or 3D, but you need to have retail logic and production logic. So ultimately, when you have e-fashion running on any point of sale, and this could be online or brick and mortar, the ideal value flow should be informing in real time, by the way, with the source of truth, which is the market data, informing in real time the supply chain. So for the first time ever, we have the capacity, and I'm talking technically and operationally, to connect two dots that in the past were never connected at scale. Many different points of sale, and in some cases third parties, so a point of sale that you don't own as a brand, like multi-brand, boutiques, department stores, marketplaces, you name it, and connecting all of this to the supply chain upstream. And this shall inform in real time with a much better data set the real information and real rich data that should guide then the upstream part to balance much better and optimize much better everything: raw materials, planning, obviously the allocation of resources, labor capacity, you name it. So in this vision, for the first time ever, we can inform the full chain from the point of sale all the way to the supply side. And this is what we mean by e-fashion, electronically connecting those dots. And again, it goes without saying, we will save for sure many of the resources, again, raw materials, finished goods, people's time, energy, etc., 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 which is absolutely needed if we want to flip the page, if we want, again, to start this inflection point.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Another term that I haven't heard until today, and now you're the second person to use it, is digital twin. I know Mark from Legility brought it up, and now you're using it, and I guess I have all these new words to add to my vernacular. So before we get to you, Aslog, because you actually speak from the brand and retail perspective, which I think is very valuable in this conversation. John, is there anything you want to add to at this point?
Well, these are two great stories, but the innovation is coming from the supplier side. I think we hear a lot of retail innovation and a lot of requests and pressure on manufacturers on the production side, and yet here's innovation coming the other way. You know, Brad represents that in U.S. production, Gonzalo in luxury. And Gonzalo in particular is on that bridge of 3D, not from design and sampling, but 3D activated into production. I think that's very significant.
So Aslog, I'm sure a lot of people recognize you. You're no stranger to this industry, and I know you have your latest venture, Cutler, which you're a sustainable venture, which you're building in Iceland. But as we mentioned in the last panel with Alex Partners as part of our study, we saw that some of the hardest challenge in business today is the cultural and corporate change. And this is very significant when you're trying to get large organizations to pivot. So can you tell us how you're building the sustainable venture and what you're doing differently and how you're able to be a little bit more agile and incorporate some of the things we're talking about into your supply chain and into your business?
Yes, sure. Well, thank you first for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on the panel. And you're absolutely right. Change in corporate culture and transformation, it's hard in any industry, and particularly in larger companies. I have, throughout my career in the fashion industry, been surprised to see again and again how slow this industry, that is all about creativity, is at innovation when it comes to business models and systems. And in the last years, as I started looking at how are we as an industry addressing the impact that we're having on the environment, I felt like there aren't enough companies. Sorry, apparently I have to refresh here. Mm-hmm.
It's live. Anything could happen live. Hold on.
Is this
You're
good?
back.
Okay, good. Yeah, great. So I felt like there aren't enough companies that are taking drastic enough steps, that are really trying to change things in a big way. And I felt like there is an opportunity to create a win-win situation where you're doing things differently, rethinking them in a way that's both positive for the environment, but also for the bottom line. So this is where my brand Cutler came in. It's a direct-to-consumer brand that sells fashion, and we have an environmental focus and our vegan brand. The brand draws its inspiration from my home country of Iceland. Katla, by the way, is the name of a volcano, a very powerful volcano in Iceland, but also a female name. So to me, the name kind of represents what the brand stands for, which is protection of nature and female empowerment. And I felt with Cutler, there's an opportunity. The benefit of being a new company is that you can create systems from scratch that are different. You're not tied down by ways of doing things and a corporate culture that's existing. So what does this mean for us? So first of all, of course, when it comes to the fabrics, we're very careful in terms of selection and environmental impact of them. Transparency is a big part for us. One of the most important elements is tackling this huge issue of overproduction in the industry. As we know, there's on average 30 to 40% overproduction each season on average in the industry. And this is something we really wanted to tackle. So how do we do that? We partner, we create long-term relationships with manufacturers. We're not trying to squeeze out every dollar in our unit cost. We're trying to build strong relationships with factories that take care of their employees, make sure there are good working relationships, and that believe in our vision in terms of the future of the industry. So these are factories that are willing to work on smaller batches at a time, in many cases on demand after an order comes in, and they share this vision for the future. So that's really been the focus. And obviously, if you can cut out a lot of the excess inventory, then that's positive for the bottom line, but also extraordinarily positive for the environment.
So Aslog, that is saying a lot. And if I could distill it down to just a few words, we're talking here about a vision for zero inventory and zero waste. So do you really think that's possible? And do you think your customer cares?
I do think it's possible, and I think our customer cares a lot. And it's not to say that it's easy. There's major transformation isn't easy. There's a lot of work that needs to go into it, but it's a lot about rethinking systems, and it's about incentivizing people in the right way. So I think, unfortunately, this industry, there hasn't been enough done to incentivize innovation. I think we have cultures where people are incentivized to do more of the same, do more better, squeeze more money out of the production cost, etc. But this industry, unfortunately, not enough companies really encourage change. And you can see stark examples of the opposite, for example, in Silicon Valley. Take Google, where they had a 20% work rule. People were supposed to use 20% of their time to do something different from their day-to-day job, to try to innovate, to try to move things forward. So I think we need to build this more into the culture. Technology is going to be a very important part of achieving this and becoming better at predicting. We are using local manufacturing as well, as close as possible to the customer, which allows us to be on shorter lead times. But these deep partnerships with manufacturers are going to be critical. When it comes to the customer side, they 100% care, and they care more and more. If you look at social media data for European and American customers, every group under 40 cares more about sustainable fashion and about runway fashion, which is really interesting to me, having built a business in runway sales in the past. So, and if you look at the younger age groups, it's a more and more drastic interest in sustainable fashion. I think sustainability is not yet a determining factor for most customers. It's a nice to have, it's not a must have. So it's also important to have beautiful product that they relate to. But this factor of being sustainable, being environmentally friendly, is something that they love to take part in. They care about it more and more. So I think it's really all about constructive, positive messaging, and then beautiful creative that they react to. The product in the end also has to stand for itself, of course, as always.
So, Aslog, I'm happy you brought up social media because obviously you have had tremendous success and experience in social media. What is the strategy to reach this new generation of consumer you speak to? And how do you incorporate your sustainable message into your social media strategy?
So I think, as in all parts of marketing, first of all, you have to have a very good understanding of your target audience. You have to be very consistent in terms of how you message that audience. So the tone in which you talk to them, visual consistency, even posting at specific times of the day. And you have to understand the messaging that resonates with them, and as well as providing influencers, etc., people wearing the clothing that they relate to. I do want to emphasize the importance of finding the right audience in social media versus just growing a big audience. It is absolutely critical to find the people that really believe in your mission. And this also relates to the influencers you work with. We have, for Cutler, worked with influencers that have huge followings. And then others that have smaller followings, but that really authentically believe in what we're doing and share our vision. And we've found much more significant results with those influencers that really were tied to the mission, even if they had smaller followings. So they took more care in their posts. They really put more of their heart into it. It was more authentic, etc. So that has really led to better results for us. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the good thing about the younger audience today is they really do care. I think it's a lot about education, continuous messaging, but including it in a fun and positive way. So it's not about criticizing anyone for their current practices. It's really about pointing out these little things that you can do will make a difference. And this is why it's important to rethink the industry. Here's how we can do things in a way that's better for all of us, and tie that in with beautiful product. I really think that is the long-term solution for reaching this audience.
All right. Well, now it's my favorite time of the conversation. It's when I get to ask some tough questions. So, completely understand, Brad and Gonzalo, what you both are doing. But it is niche markets that you are currently both catering to. Gonzalo, it's luxury for you. And for Brad, it's primarily socks and accessories. So, Gonzalo, why don't you kick this off? Is this big business? Is this scalable? Is this relevant to all merchandise?
No, absolutely. And I would actually argue first on claiming that luxury it's niche. It's actually a multi-hundred billion dollar business, so it's actually not that niche. But it's true that real impact will come if we tackle and if we do this with mid-market and obviously volume. And we have started, maybe because our headquarters are in Europe, and maybe because back then our network, our contacts were European brands. We've started with high-end brands, and again, because of that principle, brands that in some cases work already with inventory-less categories, products that are really special, that are just made after someone purchases. But now we're growing and getting other product categories and other price points into our platform. So my answer is big fat yes. So it's absolutely viable to bring this into volume and into, let's say, lower price points. We're actually working with some of the largest European companies as well on volume. And as you know, there are quite a few ones that are really, really big, like H&M, Inditex, just to name a few. And we're happy to say that over the last year, we have selected sneakers and ready-to-wear for simple products, so t-shirts, hoodies, and sweatshirts for mid-market brands. And with both product categories, as you know, the production processes are quite different from footwear to ready-to-wear. We are actually cooperating and working alongside with brands and manufacturers to scale this capacity to connect the three dots: product, point of sale, production in a much better way, informing and optimizing much better everything that we just mentioned before. So I don't have any doubts. My only big doubt is how long will it take for everyone to see that this is really happening. I don't know if it will take 2 years or 20 years. Obviously, we would all love to be faster, but that's my only doubt. But this is happening, and that's for sure.
So Gonzalo, you work with personalized production. It's prepaid. There's no inventory, and charge a premium. What's not to like about that? You call that a Trojan horse for the future. Why can't that be 20-25% of a business?
No, it can be, but again, as in any paradigm shift, the status quo is there, and to be honest, technology exists, and this is not rocket science per se. We're not redesigning essentially, the singular pieces of the puzzle. We're in a way twisting the full puzzle. In other words, we're not changing the way that a pair of shoes is produced or a t-shirt is cut and sewn. Those building blocks are pretty much the same. What we're saying here, it's the full architecture, the full business model of the industry, what we were calling the value chain, is effectively redesigned. And we will face the chicken and egg problem. So we won't have more factories coming into it if brands are not there yet, and vice versa. Brands cannot accelerate this if their partners, their factory and sourcing and manufacturing partners are not equipped for that. And this is also why, by the way, we are committed also to funding some of the case studies on the factory side. So we really want to accelerate their growth because we don't have any doubts that those figures that you've just mentioned, John, are possible, and we will see sooner or later an inventory-less or risk-free product category emerging, hopefully overcoming 20 or 25% of brands' businesses. Let's see how long will we take to get there, but it's absolutely possible, scalable, and viable. Now we need to start working on accelerating all of that.
Right, and I think from Fox River's perspective, we most of our business is mid-market or premium, and a lot of it coming from mid-market. And we started with the volume customers that had volume programs already, and then started converting them to risk-averse programs, lower inventories, quicker turn times. And I think that's part of the reason why the adoption has been challenging. But the retailers that have adopted and embraced the model have achieved enormous success, significant reductions in working capital and risk, even during the pandemic. It's been super interesting to see that play out.
Well, do you think socks and accessories then is the laboratory for your best customers and best retailers? Can they learn in that part of the business what's possible with other vendors and brands and merchandise?
I think so. There's a couple reasons. One, I think we need a bias reaction, even if it's a small category or a small component of your business. You can learn a lot from it, and it can generate funds that you can reinvest in other parts. But the thing I like about knit accessories is the distance between raw materials and finished goods is really short. So it's a great place to innovate and learn, and then figure out how to tackle the more difficult problems of cut and sew later on. So I think it's not only a good incubator, I think it's a good learning process to really kind of work out the kinks before you take on longer, more complicated processes.
So Gonzalo, actually, before I say this, I just want to tell the audience that we are going to be taking some live Q&A. So if you have some, please drop it in. But going off script a little bit, because I did see a question come in, and I want to ask it in response to your business model, or John, what you said: take the pre-order, get the money up front. Well, Trojan horse, great. But are customers willing to wait for the product to be manufactured and shipped to them 2, 3, 4 weeks? And there's one thing to work with the Gucci's of the world, luxury, very fashion forward product. What about a basic? What about a t-shirt? What about a jean? What's your perspective on that?
No, great question. And obviously, if we remove the scarcity element of luxury, this desirability, right? And obviously, we have the extreme case of Hermes or Dior or Fendi, where you wait a year for a beautiful handbag. No one will wait more than a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks max, if we're talking about regular brand. We have studied this very carefully, and obviously there isn't a single answer that covers the full complexity of fashion. But I would say, as a rule of thumb, that it's okay to deliver goods same week. And I'm really happy to say that we have scaled and optimized for ready to wear, some factories delivering in 2 to 5 days ready to wear, so t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. With footwear for commercial sneakers, we've been able to deliver between 5 and 7 working days. And this is actually perfectly viable. We have never seen a decrease on engagement and conversion. Actually, there is a paradox. If you deliver too fast, people will not believe this was just made for them, and they perceive it as less valuable. So there is a balance, an interesting balance that you can play. And I would say anything between 2 and 7 days, it's absolutely fine, and it works very well for the upstream part.
I've learned a lot about how I even shop during the past 2 years. Is usually I'm not a big fan of shopping online. I like to go into the brick and mortar store, maybe because I don't have a family and have free time on the weekends. But nevertheless, I become more patient because I'm a big fan of brand X. I like the fit of brand X. And when they tell me we're out of it, but put your email and we'll ship it to you in 3 weeks, essentially, I'm not going to wear it that night. So I think we are starting to shift how we procure as consumers our garments. A question for you, Aslog, and John, you and I talk a lot about this offline, especially with so many of the DTC brands now going public and they're opening up their books to the world. And you're like, whoa, $1 billion valuations, losing a lot of money. I know that's a general statement, but why are so many of these DTC brands unprofitable? And how are you going to operate your business differently, not to be just one of those, marketing, I don't want to use the word schemes, but marketing, acquire a lot of customers, lose a lot of money, yeah. IPO, and become very rich. I mean, that doesn't sound so bad when I say it like that. But
okay, we can pause there because, Aslog, I think this actually is the toughest question of the day.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There has certainly been a lot of conversation about the profitability or lack thereof of D2C brands and businesses following the S1 filings of Allbirds, Warby, Rent the Runway, etc. Now, it's important to keep in mind with these companies that they had a very clear strategy, which is invest until you dominate your sector. So these are Silicon Valley darlings, access to a lot of capital, and clearly you cannot have that strategy unless you have access to a lot of capital. And so it's a risky strategy for companies in general, but if you have that access, you can take that. What's interesting to see with these companies, for example, Warby, now they've gotten to a certain level of maturity. they are going more towards a traditional route of growth. So a big part of their plan is now opening retail stores. So this disruptor is now going more directly against the key incumbent, Luxottica. So that's interesting, but there is a different way to do things. Now, D2C, of course, has the benefits of allowing for much higher margins. Marketing costs can be high, but with Cutler, we're not taking this approach of relying on big money coming in. We're not building a hype brand. We're building a brand for the future. We're doing it carefully. We want this to be lean. This no inventory model is a very important component of that, of creating good economics. So adding the team members slowly as the as the revenue justifies it. And I think it's also important, we are a D2C brand, but because marketing costs in D2C can be high, I think being a little bit flexible in terms of taking on, in select cases, strategic partners that can also sell the product for you is an important component of assisting the marketing. So there are two very distinct routes. One is this capital intensive, invest until you dominate, and the other is build old school in a lean way and grow gradually, and that's the route we're going after.
So, Brad and Gonzalo, one last question for you both. Let's talk about, how do we accelerate an industry to go green, to go digital? Where is the investment coming from? How do we really accelerate this change? Brad, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So I think adoption is a key barrier, and Gonzalo and I have had this conversation many times. I think that's the key piece. We've got to make it easy for information and collaboration to happen. Make the supply chain more transparent.
Okay, well, he comes back. Gonzalo, you want to jump in?
For sure. So as anything in the corporate world, starting small, it's smart. So you don't need to reinvent and to redesign a complete new factory. Let's try, as Brad was just saying before, with a smaller category that you perhaps have in your own business. So, and I'm talking here about brands and retail. If you're on the upstream parts, factories or sub-suppliers, materials, etc., we need to think for the fashion industry as many other industries are doing. And I like to learn from the car and electronics industry, where you don't see any contract going through that has less than 5 years. So you need to think on a relation that will last. And it's impossible to reinvent every single season, every single year, your relations. It's impossible. So we need to stop, and we, I guess, on a post-pandemic world, we need to collaborate much more. And simple things that used to be, myths, like it's impossible to pay more on my unit cost. These things need to be completely, reset. It's actually fine, and it might be fine to pay 20 or 25 or 30% more on my unit cost if my margins are actually better, and if my working capital ratios are better, and everyone in the end is happy. My manufacturer partner is making more money per unit, and I'm having less inventory or dead stock in the end of the season, and my margins are still healthy. So we need to go back to the whiteboards and redesigning some of the fundamental ratios of the industry. And I can tell in advance that every single route goes to solid partnerships, solid relations that are not done season by season, are done on multi-year roadmaps. So to me, this is absolutely key and clear. And until we get there, we will keep doing the same mistakes. We will keep, seeing, negative working capitals and negative margins season after season. So we need to think this in a fundamental, different way.
So, John, 30 seconds. You know, I know you criticize me for being a skeptic, but I also am an advocate of change, but I'm just skeptical of that change. Anything you want to say in closing that kind of encapsulates everything we're trying to?
This is upstream innovation. All three of these approaches have investment behind them, venture capital in the case of Gonzalo and Aslog, and private equity behind Fox River Mills. So there's a vision, there's momentum, and this is the 10%, Eddie, that we want to watch.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know you guys are all over the world, so thank you for waking up early or staying up late. Brad, if you're still there, we thank you, and we'll hope to see you soon in person.